And welcome everybody to another live edition of First and Goal. Now with two hosts. It's me, Jay, and the UP, and we will be joined going forward with Bryce B at George Liquor. And today we are joined with Bruce for at PackersForTheWin.com once again to talk about free agency and the draft. Good morning, Bruce.
Good morning.
And we're gonna dive right into it just to get started right away, so we don't have to waste too much time. Just overall, the Packers for the first time have spent big money. In fact, they've spent almost, I believe, they're number one, and some of the people are saying that they've spent the most money out of everybody, and they really rebuilt their defense. But it opens up their ability now to the draft. I mean, what do you see in them? And they also kept Geronimo Allison, so they have done quite a bit this year so far. What do you think about their free agent move so far?
I really like the free agent move so far. When you look at what they've done, bringing in Darius Smith and Preston Smith, Adrian Amos, Turner, and then you even mentioned Geronimo Allison, his tender goes through, is they've patched a lot of holes. So they haven't taken any of those big superstars that are going to take them to the next level, but it gives them a lot of flexibility in the draft because you look at the things that they needed. They needed edge rushers, they needed a guard, they needed a safety, maybe a receiver. All of those now have a viable starter. So when they go into the draft, they don't have to reach for need.
Yeah, exactly.
So when looking at the draft, we saw before, everybody kind of assumed they'd be going edge, number 12 overall, and they still might. But if they don't, they at least have capable players who can fill the need at edge with Smith and Smith. And when I look at all of those pickups, I do like them. I think Darius Smith has a lot of flexibility. He's played on the line. He's played inside linebacker. He's played outside linebacker. And I think Milt Henriksen probably had something to do with bringing him in. And when I dug back into it, Mike Pettin was actually coaching linebackers in Baltimore when Milt Henriksen was there. So I think they have a relationship. I think the Packers front office understands what Mike Pettin wants in his players. And I think Smith is going to be one of those versatile pieces that Pettin can move around based on what they need. Preston Smith probably going to be more of a traditional edge rusher. And he's one of those guys who has a lot of strength at the point of attack. He's got hands. He's got moves. He doesn't have the elite bend or quick twitch athleticism that we like to see out of some of those guys. But I think he's going to be a really solid player. And he definitely fortifies that position going into the draft.
And then my co-host Bryce, since he's got to work today, he wanted to know how you thought that the not just the impact that Mercedes Lewis has coming back, because that deal just got announced this morning, just about an hour or so ago. 1-year deal, Mercedes Lewis coming back. Clearly a guy that wasn't utilized in the passing game, has underrated hands, but he is definitely a road grader blocker when it comes to tight end. And Bryce wants to know, like, what do you think of that move? And do you think that affects their ability and want at 12? Because he doesn't think at 12 now that takes tight end completely out of 12 in his opinion. And I want to know really how it affects the draft. And is Jimmy Graham still going to be on this team? Because come on, like really, so that's our question.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Mercedes Lewis signing. When you look at what LaFleur's done, Tennessee, Atlanta, he likes to use multiple tight ends. He likes to use big receivers. And those guys always seem to get involved in the blocking game. And I think Lewis is one of the top blocking tight ends in the league. So I think there's definitely a role there. When you looked at what Mike McCarthy did and how his offense evolved, they were always looking for someone like Jermichael Finley. And you see guys like Andrew Corliss, Brandon Bostic, the people that they were trying to bring in were always the more athletic tight ends, kind of a big receiver for a matchup in the passing game. I think LaFleur's going to use them a little differently. We hear a lot of talk about Graham. He's basically a big receiver. He has no inline blocking ability. He can't even really steal a positional block, which is kind of a weakness coming in here. A guy like Lewis can fill that role. And I'm with you on Graham. I would have liked to see him gone. The fact that he's still here, surprised me a little bit, especially with all the spending they did in free agency. They cut Perry to free up cap space. They kept Graham. Makes it feel like they're definitely looking to go with multiple tight end sets. So last year they had 4 tight ends. This year now, Tanyan, Lewis, Graham, they have 3. Maybe it's still in play at 12. I wouldn't think they would value the position that highly to take a tight end at 12, though.
Well, and I guess we'll get in. This'll kind of be a little bit of a teaser for the mock. We'll get into why I really don't see 12 there because of the way that my mock breaks down, and I really don't see it being an option because of the way it breaks down. Just as a tease there, but to me, I still see and fell in love with Brian Burns. And I fell in love with Brian Burns not because he was the fastest runner, the best 3-cone, all of that. It was that when I'm watching the combine, I had to go take care of some things, kids, life happens up here in the UP especially. And I come back and sit down and I'm watching this guy do the coverage drills, and I thought it was a safety, the way he was moving in space and catching the ball and picking it out of the air. And here it's the edge rusher. And guess what? He's the longest of all these edge rushers. And I think in today's game, that ability, and especially with Pettin's need to have guys be versatile and be able to cover, I think that I've done several mocks. I keep taking Brian Burns there. I fell in love with him just based on that. The rest of his numbers, even his tape, it doesn't always flash. He's not always the biggest play guy. His numbers are solid for a high pick across his career in college. But, I think you understand where I'm going with that, right?
I do, and I was a fan of Brian Burns, obviously before the combine. I really liked him. I thought 12 might have been borderline high because of the concerns really around his weight. If you watch him play in college, he's got the burst, he's got the athleticism, he's got that crazy bend around the corner that you really love to see an edge. And that's what's missing from a guy like Preston Smith. Very solid edge rusher, but he doesn't have that next level ability to turn the corner. And that's what you really saw to Brian Burns. A lot of speed, a lot of athleticism. The concern was his size and if it could hold up. And when I was watching him, I kind of said, if this guy can get up to 250 for the combine, he might go top 10. Came in at 249, so hopefully that 1 pound is enough to drop him a couple more spots because I do really like him. And seeing the things he did at the combine, very impressive. Prior to the combine, looking at his build and his ability, I said he could either be Clay Matthews or he could be Barkevius Mingo. Because Mingo is a guy who really seemed limited by his size. He had a really narrow, slight build. Burns looks like he's able to put on that weight. And it didn't look like it was bad weight. It didn't look like it wasn't weight that he could hold and play with. Like you said, he's doing those drills. He did kind of look like a defensive back, though, a really good defensive back. But very impressed with even his hands on some of those drills, but especially his feet. I think he's going to be a really complete player. He's got the size. He's got the wingspan. He's got all the athletic traits that you want to see in an edge rusher.
And that is really, to me, I think. And I really don't usually fall in love with players like this because in past years I've been stuck on this Ted Thompson thing. And I really feel like their free agent moves have freed up and really freed them. But every time I get to doing my mock drafts, that image and that versatility and the idea that I just keep coming back to these guys like him, that your biggest concern is their lack of weight compared to their athletic ability. I go back to they're only allowed 20 hours. They don't get the weight training and the nutrition and all that in college that they do in the pros. And these guys always seem to put on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle, in their first year or two coming out of college, if they've got the work ethic in the weight room. And if that's your concern with him, it just makes me further fall in love with him because I think that's one of the easiest things to fix from college to pro.
Yeah, and I think you hit on it when you talked about the combine being a test for them, the limits they have in the college game. Once they're out of it, does he take advantage of that training? Does he take advantage of the nutrition, put the time in to get there? And it looks like he absolutely did. And then the word that you mentioned, versatility, is really what we saw. And I think that's the trademark of the Mike Pettin defense. You're looking for a bunch of different pieces that can do different things, that he can move around in different situations. And I think you look at a guy like Zadarius Smith, who can play line, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, a guy like Preston Smith, who's a really physical technician with his moves, and then a guy like Brian Burns, who's just an athletic freak with the bend and the athleticism to get around the corner. Throw in backups like Kyler Fackrell, and I think Mike Pettin can do a lot of damage in defense like that.
Would you be a guy that would be a fan of an Ed Oliver at 12 if he's there over a Brian Burns, or would you still take a Brian Burns there just because of that coverage ability?
That's a really good question. So I'm going through these mocks, especially post-combine. Burns and Oliver seem like the two prime talents that have a chance to make it to 12. And honestly, now that they've shored up edge rusher, it might be a little bit of a toss-up. I'd probably go with Burns because I think you get more chances to find interior defensive linemen that can disrupt than you do to see edge rushers that can disrupt. And they put an article out last year where I talked about all of the shortcomings where we kept hearing fans talking about we need more edge rushers. We need a 10, 15 sack guy out there. And I went through Ted Thompson's entire tenure and I looked at where the Packers picked every year and how many Pro Bowl edge rushers were chosen after the Packers' first pick. And there was one.
Who was it?
I think it was Bobby Houston. I think he went in the third. So you had Clay Matthews, he had a shot at, and he took him. And there really wasn't anybody there. And that's what's really kind of driven some of my love for getting an edge player higher. The Packers don't pick this high very early. It's a deep edge draft. And it seems like kind of the marriage of need and opportunity. So if you look through the drafts and just go back, look at Wikipedia, look at all the draft choices, and you see Pro Bowl quarterbacks falling second, third, fourth round. You very rarely see Pro Bowl edge rushers ever fall out of top 10, top 15 picks. I think they're very easy to identify in college. They don't all pan out, but it's very rare that one slips through the cracks.
And would that guy that you see slipping still be the Ja'Carri Polite from, I believe it's Florida, right?
Yeah, Polite is a guy that I thought could have been a fit at 12. I really didn't like his combine interview. Became a little heavier. You saw guys like Sweat and Burns, who obviously took advantage, like you said, of the extra training they could do, and they showed up to the combine ready to prove a point. Polite didn't test as well.
And he came across as a whiny, sensitive, thin-skinned guy, right?
He did, and I think some of the articles that came out probably put it a little too far. But the thing that I saw, watching the interview, watching how he delivered it, he didn't seem terribly upset, but he kept saying that he felt bashed. And then they asked him why he felt that. And he said, well, they're showing me all these bad plays. And they're like, why did you do this? And why did you do that? And to me, that's just what you do. If you're a player who's trying to get better, one, you're going to show up in the combine in a lot better shape than that. Two, when someone asks you what you did on plays that went wrong, you're going to explain your thought process and ask for feedback so that you can try to improve. Not only did he not do that, he took it as an insult. He felt bashed, and he wasn't exploding at the podium or anything, but just the fact that he thought that was bashing in a job interview just really gave me a lot of red flags. Maybe if he falls to 30 or 44, I just don't know if that is the kind of guy that you want to bring in and mold into your defense and your team.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. I felt, and here's my issue. I'm not as down on him for the way he feels, because I think today's world has produced a lot of sensitive people. Here's my issue. He's a defensive player. And that scares me to have that, because to me that shows defensive players nowadays, to me, it's even more concerning if you don't have that edge, because the rules are already slighted against you to where if that kind of stuff bothers you that much, what's going to happen